Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. A sunny Saturday morning in the small town of Springdale, in North Carolina, the shopping center West Haven Plaza buzzed with activity. Families crowded around to do their weekend shopping, children ran laughing between the benches, and street vendors at the entrance offered hot donuts and vanilla coffee. Amidst this peaceful bustle, a silhouette stood out with its discreet elegance. A black woman walked through the glass door of the jewelry store, Preston Fine Jewelry, a renowned store in the region, specializing in Swiss watches and designer jewelry. Her name was Angela Monroe, 38, an assistant district attorney. She was tall, poised, and exuded an aura of calm authority. That morning, she was wearing a custom-made cream suit, her perfectly matching nude pumps, and her finely braided hair were pulled up into a low bun, elegant and practical. On her wrist sparkled a discreet Cartier watch, and in her hand, she held a black Chanel bag, sober but luxurious. Angela hadn't come to impress. She had come to choose a gift. Her brother, Marcus, an Army veteran, was about to celebrate his 45th birthday. She wanted to give him a prestigious watch, a symbol of gratitude and admiration for the man who, as a child, had often acted as a father to her. As soon as she crossed the threshold, the atmosphere seemed to change subtly. Behind the illuminated glass counter, Brian Whitmore, the store manager, looked up. He was a white man in his 50s, always dressed to the nines. Impeccable navy suit, Breitling watch on his wrist, piercing gaze. He watched Angela without moving, his face hardening slightly, as if an invisible signal had gone off in his head. He didn't greet her. He leaned towards a young blonde saleswoman, Kelly, and muttered something under her breath. She raised her eyebrows briefly, visibly surprised, then nodded in response before walking over to Angela. Angela, for her part, didn't immediately pay attention to this activity. She walked slowly along the windows, admiring the watches lined up like little masterpieces, Rolex, Omega, Tag Heuer. She stopped in front of a steel Omega Speedmaster, with its elegant and timeless design. "Hello, I would like to see this watch more closely, please," she said politely to Kelly. But the saleswoman hesitated, her eyes avoiding Angela's. I have to ask the director, ma'am," she replied with a forced smile. Angela blinked, slightly surprised. "Okay, take your time." She took a step back, now observing the reflection of the scene in the store windows. She saw Brian speaking to Kelly again, giving her a look charged with insistence. He wasn't taking his eyes off her. She could feel it, that look. It wasn't that of a professional concerned about a demanding customer. It was that of a man who thought she didn't belong. A familiar, painful feeling slowly rose in his chest, the silent suspicion, this old wound that no success, no diploma, no title could completely erase. She straightened, shoulders square, and finally met Brian's gaze. "Sir, may I speak to you?" she asked calmly, her voice confident. The director seemed to hesitate, then took a few steps towards her with a fake smile. "I'm Brian Whitmore, director here. How may I help you?" Angela held out her hand, which he shook half-heartedly. "Angela Monroe. I would like to see this Omega watch. Is that possible?" He glanced quickly at her Chanel bag, her shoes, her face, as if looking for a flaw, a fault, something to justify what he already thought. "This piece is quite exclusive, you understand. It's not within everyone's reach." Angela raised an eyebrow. "And what makes you think I'm not everyone, Mr. Whitmore?" He opened his mouth, then changed his mind. Angela understood at that moment that the problem was not the watch. It was she. Angela blinked slowly, surprised, but not completely. There was something about this man's voice, the way he weighed every word, watching her without even making an effort to hide his suspicion, that put her on guard. She took a shallow breath before answering, polite but firm. "Oh really? I thought you sold to the public. I saw this watch on your website this morning. It said, available in store. The director nodded, a vague smile on his lips, the kind you give when you don't take the person in front of you seriously. Yes, of course. But you see, we've had some incidents recently. People, with bad intentions. They come in, look, ask questions, and sometimes leave with more than they should. He had said this in a sweet, almost complicit tone, as if he expected her to understand and adhere to his twisted reasoning. But in his eyes shone an unjustified fear, a deep and insidious conviction, she was out of place. Angela straightened slightly. The message, though cloaked in politeness, was clear: you are not worthy of this watch. And worse, you may be a danger. She didn't raise her voice. Her tone remained calm, edged with controlled calm. I'm an assistant district attorney, Mr. Whitmore. I know my rights perfectly well. And I can assure you, I'm not here to steal anything. I'm here to buy. Just buy. Just like any other customer. His words fell into silence like a hammer blow on a piece of glass. But Brian didn't seem to hear them. He didn't react to her statement, not even to the mention of his position. As if that detail didn't matter. Or rather, as if he refused to believe that a black woman could occupy such a position. He turned away slowly, making a vague gesture. Just a moment, I'm going to check something in the back. He went back behind the counter, but instead of heading to the stockroom or the computer system, he grabbed his phone from the register. With his back turned, his finger slid quickly across the screen. His voice was low but distinct, clear enough for the saleswoman to hear, but not clear enough for it to be explicit. Yes, hello, this is Preston Jewelry. We have a suspicious client. I'd rather not take any chances. Can you send someone over? Angela, a few meters away, saw the saleswoman blanch slightly. She had heard. She knew. But she said nothing. Her gaze shifting, she simply readjusted a bracelet in the window with exaggerated slowness. Angela, however, remained frozen. Her heart was pounding, not with fear, but with cold rage. Once again, her legitimacy was being questioned. Once again, the police were called to deal with his mere presence. But she didn't flinch. She didn't leave the store. She didn't back down. She adjusted her bag on her arm, lifted her chin slightly, and waited, worthy, standing, intractable. 10 long minutes later, the automatic door of the jewelry store opened with a discreet ding, breaking the heavy silence that had reigned since the call. 2 police officers entered the shop, their footsteps echoing clearly on the marble. The first, Officer Miguel Mendoza, a Latino man in his 40s, wore a focused but calm expression. His gaze quickly scanned the space, then stopped abruptly when he saw Angela. He stiffened slightly, recognizing her immediately. Madam Monroe, he said, surprised but respectful. Are you okay? We've had reports of suspicious behavior. Angela didn't answer right away. She stood straight, impassive, her arms crossed, his gaze icy and directed towards the manager, who had taken refuge behind the counter, trying to appear busy. Then, with a sharp calm, she made a simple gesture of her hand in Brian's direction. Just ask Mr. Whitmore, what exactly is this suspicious behavior? I'm curious to hear it. Brian, taken aback, jumped up. He clearly hadn't anticipated this turn of events. He looked nervously at the police officers, then at Angela, then back at the police officers. He began to stutter, as if desperately searching for an escape route. She was looking at the windows. She was asking questions, specific questions. She seemed interested in some very expensive models. And, she didn't look like our usual customers. I just wanted to be careful. That's all. And heavy silence fell on the room. Even the other employees froze. The second agent, Officer Daniel Parker, a young white man with a direct gaze, slowly frowned. He stared at Brian with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. So, if I understand correctly, you called the police because a well-dressed black woman was asking questions about an Omega watch in a jewelry store? Brian opened his mouth to reply, but no sound came out. Angela, for her part, did not move an inch. With icy professionalism, she slowly pulled out a black leather hard card from her bag. She opened it in front of the two officers and handed it directly to Brian, who took a half-step back as he read it. Angela Monroe, Assistant District Attorney for Wake County. She paused, staring straight into the eyes of the man who had just tried to have her arrested for daring to exist in a place of luxury. What you just did is not only unacceptable, but probably illegal. You have made racial innuendos, you have used law enforcement as a tool of social control, and you have metafamed in front of witnesses. You treated me like a suspect when I only did what any customer has the right to do: look, ask questions, express interest. Brian was turning pale. His jaw was trembling slightly. He stammered, unable to hold her gaze. I didn't know. I mean, if I had known who you were. Angela calmly raised her hand to interrupt him, her gaze sharper than ever. It's not that you didn't know. It's that you didn't bother to find out. For you, my color was enough to make me suspicious. My suit, my Cartier watch, my Chanel bag, my polite demeanor, none of it mattered. Because, in your mind, a black woman is not a customer. She is a threat. No one spoke. Even the other customers in the shop, who had previously pretended to be interested in the window displays, had turned their attention to the scene. The silence was so tense that one could have heard a ring fall to the floor. Officer Mendoza took a step back, visibly uncomfortable. Ms. Monroe. I'm sorry. For what it's worth. I think it's clear you pose no threat. I'll make an accurate report of what happened. Thank you, officer, she replied, without taking her eyes off Brian. I will personally see that this report reaches the proper authorities. And I urge you, Mr. Whitmore, to consider what you have just caused by ignorance, arrogance, and ordinary racism. You called the police on a prosecutor. What would you have done if I had been a high school student? A stay-at-home mom? A college student? A nurse? She put away her card slowly, with dignity, then turned on her heel. Before walking out the door, she turned around one last time. And I think your company will be hearing from you soon. From a lawyer. And with that, she left, her head held high, her bearing haughty, leaving behind a store frozen in silence, a pale and trembling manager, and two unarmed police officers facing a truth they could not ignore. The next morning, as the sun rose over Springdale, social networks were on fire. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, the video discreetly filmed in the store by a teenager named Jasmine Lee, 16, had gone viral within hours. The video, titled with a striking bitterness, "When Being Black Is Enough to Call the Police," showed the whole scene: Angela standing, calm, dignified, answering the officers, then revealing her prosecutor's card. We could even distinctly hear Brian Whitmore's words. She didn't look like our usual customers. This simple excerpt, coming from the mouth of a white man in an expensive suit, became the symbol of a racism that is still very much alive, even in the most polished, cleanest, most luxurious places. Under the video, comments were pouring in at a crazy speed. She's a prosecutor today, but she could have been my mother. Or me. Are we still calling the police for shopping while black? In 2025? Seriously? Brian Whitmore must be fired immediately. Boycott Preston Fine Jewelry. The name of Brian Whitmore became a tendency in ex-Twitter. A boycott campaign spontaneously launched under the hashtag #PrestonIsPrejudice. Influencers, lawyers, public figures, even local celebrities took up the case. The matter was no longer local, she had become national. The day after tomorrow, an official press release signed by Franklin Devereux, founder and owner of the Preston Fine Jewelry chain, was published on all channels. We sincerely apologize to Ms. Angela Monroe for the unacceptable treatment she experienced at one of our locations. Preston Fine Jewelry was founded on the values of respect, inclusivity, and trust. Manager Brian Whitmore's behavior in no way reflects our ethics. He was immediately suspended, and an internal investigation is underway. But for many, the apologies came too late. In front of the Springdale store, peaceful protesters gathered with placards. Luxury is not a color. Looking is not stealing. We don't respect dignity halfway. Angela Monroe not fit, no public appearances, she didn't give any interviews. No reaction on her social media. No press conference. But 3 days later, in the pages of the Springdale Times, an article signed by his hand was published on the front page. Its title: "I came to buy a watch. I found a mirror." In this sober, poignant text, she didn't attack directly to Brian Whitmore. She didn't talk about revenge or anger. She was talking about that suspended moment when you are made to feel like you don't belong, despite everything you have accomplished. From this silent fatigue, the one we wear every day when we constantly have to prove that we are not a threat. She wrote, "I wasn't surprised. I was tired. Tired of always having to represent something more than myself. An exception, an anomaly. Tired of smiling to reassure, of articulating to appease, of dressing like a respectable woman, so as not to disturb the space." She ended her text with these words: "I don't want Brian Whitmore to be hated. I want him to learn. I want him to look at himself in the mirror he held up to me. And I want that mirror to serve all of us." The article was shared by thousands of times, translated, read in class, discussed in the national media. Some saw it as a plea for justice. Others saw it as a helping hand to a broken society capable of correcting itself. Angela had chose dignity over revenge. But his pen, sharper than 1,000 accusations, had awakened consciences. A month later, on a morning of fine and silent rain, Angela Monroe received a thick, cream-colored envelope, with no official logo or stamp. Just his name, carefully calligraphed in blue ink. Madam Angela Monroe. She almost threw it away with the rest of the mail. But something in the handwriting made her stop. She slowly opened the envelope, slipped the letter between her fingers, and immediately recognized the signature at the bottom of the page. Brian Whitmore. She took a deep breath, then read, "Madam Monroe. I apologize. I judged you without knowing you. I reacted out of fear, but that fear was based solely on my own deeply ingrained biases. That day, I didn't see a customer. I didn't see a brilliant, respectable woman. I saw a prejudice that lives within me, one that I didn't even know how to name. Your calm, your dignity, your gaze, you confronted me with my limits. You could have humiliated me, publicly destroyed me. You didn't. You let me see what I am. And for that, as painful as it may be, I thank you. I hope that one day you will be able to see me differently. And perhaps believe that human beings can still change. Brian Whitmore." Angela stood motionless for a few minutes after she finished reading. The rain drummed gently against the windows of her living room. She still held the letter, not with anger or satisfaction, but with a calm sadness, almost fraternal. Not a personal sadness, a sadness for the world, for everything that still needs to be deconstructed, educated, and healed. She got up, crossed the corridor of her apartment, opened a discreet drawer of his desk, and slipped the letter inside. It wasn't the first. There were others, some anonymous, some signed. All received after cases she had argued, injustices she had exposed, silences she had broken. Letters of awareness. Beginnings of repair. The watch she had come to buy that day, she never bought it. She ended up giving her brother an old watch of their father's, which she had restored. Marcus looked at it with emotion, before whispering, "This one is worth 1,000 times more than all the Rolexes in the world." And he was right. Because that day, Angela had wanted to make a valuable gift to his brother. And it was finally she who had offered to society something infinitely more precious. A lesson in quiet courage. Proof that dignity does not need shouting to resonate. And a mirror held up to those who refuse to see. Until the day they have no other choice.